Today on the LA Food Podcast. Who do you think of when you think of Santa Monica dining? Is it Dave Barron of Pajot Lee? Is it Jeremy Fox of Rustic Canyon and Birdie G's? Maybe it's Josiah Citron of Melise, Citron, Charcoal, and more? Well, one name you cannot skip over when discussing Santa Monica is Raphael Lunetta, now the owner and operator of both Lunetta and Morel at the Sanborn Hotel. Chef Lunetta has been delighting the palates of Santa Monicans for nearly 4 decades. His restaurant Giraffe, which he opened in 1996 alongside lifelong best friend Josiah Citron, helped pave the way for the California high-end cuisine that's famous around the world today, earning both Lunetta and Citron the honor of being named Food & Wine's Best New Chefs. What has Lunetta learned about restaurants over the course of his career? How has he seen trends change? And what keeps him going today? Listen to find out. Also listen to find out what Larry David orders when he goes to Lunetta, which he does on a regular basis, as evidenced by the fact that the restaurant made multiple appearances in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Pretty cool if you ask me. But first, a few stories that caught my eye this week. There's the closure of Cole's French Dip, the oldest restaurant in LA, the return of Gladstone's and the El Gato Night Market, the departure of one of LA's most essential independent food media outlets, and a sincere apology to a chef I've been a little too hard on over the years. A reminder that the LA Food Podcast is powered by Acquired Taste Media. Check out our sister pods, Taqueando with Bill Esparza, and Let It Rip, a companion pod to FX's The Bear, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Please also consider leaving all of our shows a rating or a review. As always, I'm your host, Lucas Servodio, and without further ado, it's time to chow down. The LA Food Podcast is presented by The Lonely Oyster. Unwind at The Lonely Oyster's Echo Park Night Watch. Did you know that every night is industry night at The Lonely Oyster, dear listener? Stroll in after 10 p.m. nightly for a one-of-a-kind experience designed for the night owls and hospitality pros. Indulge in $12 handshake cocktails, expertly crafted liquid chef concoctions, delicious late-night hot bites, and chef's choice dozen oysters. More than just a place to unwind, The Lonely Oyster warmly welcomes industry professionals, providing a space where like-minded individuals can connect, relax, and enjoy the camaraderie that comes with the late-night scene. Whether you're looking to kick back after a long shift or simply enjoy the vibrant atmosphere, late night at The Lonely Oyster is the perfect rendezvous for those who appreciate good company and great food and drinks. Don't miss this nightly affair and let the good times roll at The Lonely Oyster. Dear listener, I would say happy Friday, but let's be honest, it's been somewhat of a bleak week for restaurants in LA. We've had news of even more restaurant closures, including My Two Cents, the elevated Southern comfort food staple on Pico that's been serving the community for more than 12 years. Shibumi, the wonderful Japanese izakaya in downtown LA, said it's closing. Father Saul and I actually shared a memorable New Year's Eve dinner there, so that's particularly sad for me. And Melody Wine Bar in Virgil Village also announced its closing, which was way more than a wine bar, by the way. It was also an incubator for some key pop-ups that eventually turned into very successful full-fledged restaurants. For example, De La Nonna, the pizza restaurant in the Arts District, comes to mind as a restaurant that popped out of there. I remember I had their pizza for the first time there in 2021. It was during my journey to try 100 different pizzerias in LA in 365 days, and I first had the chance to try De La Nonna at Melody Wine Bar. So a very, very sad loss to the community. Of course, the closure that grabbed all the headlines was that of Cole's French Dip in downtown LA. Owner Sed Moses announced that on August 3rd, Cole's will close after 117 years of operation. Moses told eaters Matt Kang that the closure comes due to a litany of reasons, he said, including ongoing impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2023 writers and actors strikes, rising labor and rent costs, and local bureaucracy, he said. I want to spend more time talking about this institution, what it's meant to the city, and what its closure says about the continued harrowing conditions facing LA's restaurants, especially those in downtown LA. We're actually working on having Sed on this podcast soon, so I'll probably save that discussion for that time. But in the meantime, I'll just say that this is so gutting on a personal level because Kohl's played a very special place in a couple of key years of my life. One, the first year I started dating my wife, they had a mezcal tasting there because, as you might know, it's connected to this incredible cocktail bar called Varnish, right? And the bartenders there were partnering with a mezcal brand to showcase all of their varieties of mezcal. And so we got to go there, my wife and I, early date, and try all these different types of mezcal. Neither of us had particularly trained palates. And we still, talk about that date in very fond terms. It kind of sparked our shared love for mezcal in a lot of ways. My wedding cocktail happened to be a mezcal Negroni. So, in some ways I owe that to Kohl's and the Varnish. And then on another note, Kohl's French dip was the 100th sandwich, the final sandwich of my journey to eat 100 LA sandwiches in 365 days in 2023. And I saved Kohl's specifically for the last because I wanted to end the journey at a historic landmark institution. And what better place than Kohl's? So really, really sad to see it closing. And I really hope we can get set on here in the next couple of weeks so we can hear directly from the source, what led to this decision, how difficult it was. But also, he has been very active in working with folks like Eddie Navarrete and the Independent Hospitality Coalition in advocating for restaurants. So, he didn't make this decision in a vacuum. He has a very good sense of the things happening in and around the industry. So definitely want to hear from him and perhaps Eddie as well about, what's going on and why this happened. But in the midst of the doom and gloom, I do want to point out a couple of silver linings for restaurants that emerged this week. One is that Gladstone's, the legendary seafood restaurant on PCH that had been forced to close due to the fires in January, announced that it is finally ready to reopen. Restaurant manager Jim Harris told the LA Times that as of July 4th, the outdoor dining deck is open for business. They're hoping to reopen the main dining room by next spring, but in the meantime, this is excellent news, so you should definitely consider going to support. Secondly, the El Gato Night Market, which takes place on the border of Pico Union and Westlake every Thursday through Sunday, has reopened following a couple of weeks off due to all of the fear surrounding the ice raids happening in our city. This is a place, in case you're unfamiliar, where dozens of street vendors gather to serve food, drink, and more. It's a real family-friendly environment, and if you're looking for a way to support street vendors and the folks most endangered by the continued terrorization wrought by ICE, this is a great place for you to do it. I was personally elated when I saw Lauren Ng's coverage of the market's reopening in the LA Times, but just a reminder to my influencer friends out there, it's definitely more important than ever for us to be giving shine to businesses run and operated by immigrants, but just be careful of how you're doing it. You don't want to be unintentionally doxing anybody. So maybe consider posting about the market generally, centering close-ups of the food as opposed to the vendors themselves. And, maybe even just consider sending the videos to your friends as opposed to posting it publicly, at least in this moment in time. I think it's just a really tough balance to strike right now because we want to be supporting, but we also don't want to be endangering anyone. So just be aware, be conscientious, and use your best judgment. Couple of media-related stories I wanted to highlight. First of all, congratulations to the LA Taco team for being featured in the Washington Post. WAPO ran a story on how this unassuming taco blog has hit the streets and really led the street-level reporting around the ICE raids. Of course, we in LA already know that LA Taco's work extends far beyond tacos, but it's cool to see them getting shine on a national level. I hope it actually helps boost their subscriptions because, as we know, there have been some financial issues happening over there for the last year or so. So hopefully this helps them stay afloat and continue what is proving to be very essential work, not just as far as highlighting tacos and street vendors goes. Secondly, I wanted to spare a quick thought for Ligaya Michon's first official review as chief critic of the New York Times. Last week, Father Saul and I waxed lyrical about Tejal Rao's first official review as chief critic, but this week we got Ligaya's first official review. As a reminder, Tejal is assuming the role of roaming critic, and Ligaya is going to be more focused on New York City. The review this week was of Caribbean restaurant Kabawa in the East Village. I wouldn't say it was quite as compelling as Tejal Rao's review of Akamaya in New Orleans personally, But I gotta say, I'm loving this model of having multiple critics with slightly different focuses. You know, we've seen the LA Times boost its criticism over the last year by giving Jen Harris the reins to also review restaurants, and that's definitely enhanced the overall product, since now we've got both her and Bill Addison doing the work, so to speak. But if I may be so bold as to make a suggestion to editors Lori Ochoa and Daniel Hernandez, it may be worth considering whether giving Jen and Bill specialized focuses would serve the coverage. For example, imagine what would happen if Bill continues focusing on statewide coverage like he did for the 101 Best Restaurants in California list, and Jen gets to go whole hog on reviewing LA, meaning new reviews every week in a way that we haven't really been getting as of late. Personally, I think that would be dope. Will it happen? Definitely not, but a boy can dream. Finally, Emily Wilson of The Angel announced that she's leaving LA and therefore that the focus of her Substack will shift to covering New York, where she's moving back to be closer to family. How fucking selfish is that? Robbing our city of one of its great independent food media outlets just so that she can be closer to family? The fuck? Just kidding, of course. We've had plenty of joy on this podcast diving into and dissecting Emily's coverage over the years, most recently with her survey of what Angelinos want from restaurants right now. I think Emily is a great example of how transplants can actually bring a welcome outside perspective to what's happening in our city. I feel like there's a lot of hate towards people who aren't born and raised here, but who dare to come and share opinions about LA food. And I say this as a transplant myself, and despite the fact that I've lived here for close to 2 decades, I still get plenty of scoffs and dismissals because fate would have it that I wasn't born at Glendale Memorial Hospital or wherever the fuck. Obviously, I'm biased, but I believe that if you bring the right amount of respect and humility to learning about the city, and you come at it from a pure place of wanting to be part of something as opposed to just judging it, then it shouldn't matter where you were born and raised. If anything, we all come at food from unique perspectives, and LA in and of itself is such a diverse place with such vastly different living experiences from one neighborhood to the next. It seems really dumb to make being from here a requirement to having an opinion about food. And Emily has been a great example of that curiosity, humility, hard work that lead to great stories and do a whole lot more for the city and its dining scene than do a lot of these nativist anti-transplant bros. And they're usually bros. So Emily, you'll be missed. That said, quick plug, The Angel is not folding, it's just transitioning its focus a little bit. And just by virtue of the depth of reporting that Emily does, I'm sure it'll still be worth your subscription, dear listener, so don't give it up just yet. Last thing before we get to our interview with Chef Raphael Lunetta, a couple of meals I've had recently. One is Pampas Grill, the churrascaria at the original Farmers Market. I took my wife to see F1 last weekend. Huge mistake, by the way. If you bring your wife to see a Brad Pitt movie on date night, you are just shooting yourself in the foot. But before we watched it, we decided to have dinner at Pampas because since my wife started eating meat again last year, she had yet to do the Brazilian steakhouse experience. Now, I know that this isn't really the traditional, all-out fogo de chão or, real Brazilian steakhouse experience, but Pampas has been a standby for me ever since a college buddy of mine took me there. And yeah, you can complain about some of the meats being slightly over or whatever. I think it's a consistently great experience, as borne out by the fact, by the way, that it's always got the longest line of any of the food stalls at the farmer's market. Now, when I said this on Instagram, actually, funnily enough, one of my followers surfaced an interesting conspiracy theory. He said that the reason they always have the longest lines is because the owner also owns a tour bus company and basically brings all the people on the tour bus to the restaurant. This was said almost as this is why they've got long lines. Honestly, who gives a shit? To me, that's just an ingenious business practice. But even if you do that, you got to stand on business and be able to serve a good product. And as someone who's been to Pampas probably dozens and dozens of times, I can say it hits. It just hits. It's not going to change your life, but it's going to be a good time. And you're going to like it. My cuts, my go-to cuts, the garlic beef and the picanha. I'm sure I said that wrong because Brazilians' pronunciation of stuff is all fucked up. In a good way, I say that with love. Finally, I visited Baravoya with a couple of friends last week. This is Evan Funky's brand new bar tucked behind Mother Wolf in Hollywood. It's a super dark, sexy room. It's definitely giving Las Vegas. They even we went at 5 p.m. so the sun was still out, but the blinds are pulled all the way down. So you wouldn't know what time it is. It could be 5 p.m., it could be 3 a.m., and that's a very Las Vegas design choice. But this is designed to be a cocktail bar where you can enjoy some shareable Roman bites while getting your drink on. They've got a lot of the classics that you'll recognize from Evan Funky properties, including the zucchini blossoms. Then they've got pizzas, and they've got other fried bits and bobs. For example, they have this little carbonara frittatina. It's almost like those fried mac and cheese bites you can get in the frozen section at Trader Joe's, but done obviously to a much higher level degree of execution. The highlights for me were the portafoglio pizza. This is that folded over pizza that Evan likes to do. And this version at Baravoya, it's got oxtail meatballs, beautiful oxtail meatballs. They actually seem breaded on the outside, and inside you get the really luscious melt in your mouth oxtail experience. And it's served with these done to death chicories. I think it even says overcooked chicories or something on the menu, right? But that is the best way to eat those greens. The way that they're cooked, it brings out some of their sweetness in addition to their bitterness. And I just thought it was a really classic, really delicious combination. I'll definitely be ordering that again. The table's favorite dish was probably the sfincione alla lione, which, if you're familiar with Evan Funky's Felix, right? His famous bread that he makes is the sfincione. It's that Sicilian focaccia type bread, right? Well, at Baravoya, he's doing a version that is essentially garlic knots. He's basically taken the sfincione and made them into garlic knots. And you would have to be a fucking serial killer to not enjoy this dish. That's what it comes down to, right? There's no way to not enjoy this. So got to give the shout out to the sfincione alla lione. But maybe the most memorable taste of the night was from one of the cocktails. It's called the Morso di Vita, which translates to a bite of life. It's a vodka cocktail, which I don't usually fuck with because I'm more of a tequila guy. I recently heard on a podcast that tequila is actually an upper when it comes to alcohol, relatively speaking. So it makes you happy and it makes you want to party, as opposed to other alcohols, which make you a little bit more down, right? And I just crave happiness, guys. You know me. I'm a broken person. I crave happiness. So I usually gravitate towards the tequilas and the mezcals of the world. But if I'm going vodka cocktail, this is about as good as it gets. It's a vodka cocktail with tomato, basil, and get this, passion fruit. It sounds insane, but the passion fruit is such a minor player because I think it's a passion fruit liqueur that they're using. And all it does is it picks up and kind of mirrors the sweetness of the basil that's already in the dish or in the cocktail. And it just works absolutely perfectly. It's refreshing. It's got the right amount of savory notes to it too because of the tomato, very faint tomato flavor. It's a delight to drink. It is addictive. It's refreshing. And more than anything, it's satisfying, right? It's a satisfying drink. I don't like a lot of these cocktails, right? They're really out there with their combinations. They're trying to impress you. This one, you're meant to enjoy. It's a little on the pricey side. I think it's almost $30, but you're in Hollywood. You know you're going to be spending a pretty penny anyway. You might as well enjoy it. Baravoya, I would go again. Honestly, it wasn't even that busy. It's a little annoying. You have to make reservations. You can't just stroll in. So, if you're planning on going there before some sort of Hollywood event, just be aware you're going to have to make a reservation. But definitely a very good time. And on that note, I've been doing a little bit of reflecting as of late, and I think I want to offer an apology to Evan. In case you missed it, dear listener, Father Saul and I reviewed his episode of Chef's Table last year, and I was pretty harsh in the way I spoke about him. I think I said his serious demeanor feels put on and pretentious. I took issue with him for paying lip service to the Italian women who taught him how to make pasta, but then making an empire in his own image that I felt should do more than give those women lip service, but perhaps even remunerate them for their expertise. In hindsight, that doesn't make any fucking sense, especially as we see everything happening with the ICE raids and the silence of people like Rick Bayless, who have actually appropriated Mexican cuisine, yet refuse to even praise Mexican cooks. Looping Evan in with that is out of order. Not that I was making this argument necessarily, but we should make clear that Italian food cannot be appropriated. You can't appropriate the food of the colonizers. Sorry about it. I don't make the rules. Even so, Evan isn't just profiting off of a culture that he wasn't born into. It's clear he gives a shit about it. He respects the hell out of it. And even though I cannot like some of his dishes, it doesn't give me the right to make it into something bigger than that. And I definitely did that last year. For that, I apologize. Does it matter? Will he give a shit? Does he even know about my past critiques? I don't know. I don't think so. I know he watches or has watched a couple of my Instagram stories, but all I know is that you have heard my disdain for Evan, dear listener, and I just wanted to set the record straight on that. Wow, growth, emotional rawness, things you didn't think you were going to get from a local food podcast. Now that's what we call surprise and delight. Look, that'll probably do for today. Couple quick plugs before we get to our interview. Be sure to listen to our new companion podcast for this season of The Bear. It's called Let It Rip. It's linked in the show notes. You can find it there. This week we reviewed episodes 3 and 4, and I think they were the best episodes of The Bear since season 2, the magical season 2. So you're going to want to hear our reactions to that. That's done in partnership with our friends over at Compliments to the Chef, the amazing Top Chef podcast, Nancy and Bits, who you've heard on this podcast before. And then also be sure to go listen to Bill Esparza's Taqueando, which dropped another episode this week in which he spoke with former CNN reporter Nick Valencia, who actually grew up right in my neck of the woods in Eagle Rock, Highland Park area. They spoke in a lot of detail about the Mexican-American dream from a food perspective, but also outside of food, and why it's so scary for a lot of people, why it's so scary to see immigrants achieving success. No matter what side of the issue you fall on, I think this is definitely a valuable perspective to listen to. So I highly recommend going to listen to it. And with that, we'll be back right after the break with my conversation with Raphael Lunetta. Dear listener, I made a deal with my wife. She let me start a food podcast and eat ungodly amounts of noodles, pizza, sandwiches, and more under 2 conditions. One is that I never utter her name. The other is that I find ways to be healthy outside of my work in food. Being the fantastic partner I am, I found a few ways to up my health game. I exercise almost every day, I try to sneak in salads for lunch whenever I can, and I only ever snack on healthy foods. The macadamia nut has become an essential part of my daily routine with the best omega 6-to-3 ratios in the nut game, 8 times better than pistachios and 20 times better than cashews. At houseofmacadamias.com, they've got a bunch of different macadamia products that you can enjoy, like savory and sweet snack packs and chocolate-covered snack bars. One of the problems with macadamias I've found is that they can be expensive, but I'm solving this for you, dear listener, because as of today, all you've got to do is head to houseofmacadamias.com and use code LAFOOD to get a 10% discount on a healthy snack that also happens to be delicious. So what are you waiting for? Head to www.houseofmacadamias.com/discount/LAFood and go nuts. So it's my pleasure today to be sitting down with none other than Chef Raphael Lunetta. We're here at this gorgeous restaurant, Morel, at the Sanborn Hotel in Santa Monica. Chef, I've got an icebreaker question for you. You're cooking for a very stoned red hot chili pepper at 2 a.m. What are you making?
Ooh, okay. So I would imagine that if it was 2 a.m., I've got a pantry, I've got some stuff in the fridge, but I'm probably not really prepared to do this. But there's always a good angel hair pasta in the cabinet. There's always flour. There's always some things. So I think I'd start with, and there's always a couple things in the fridge. So one thing I used to love to make late at night, or we would make them together, it's like a really nice angel hair pasta with fresh tomatoes. And I would probably try to, maybe there'd be some, pancetta. Ooh. Maybe a little bit of botarga.
Okay.
Because I would try to elevate. I would try to create like something simple, but kind of soupy. Like we like to make our pasta. So fresh tomatoes, angel hair pasta, but in the early phases, garlic that's sliced.
Okay.
So thinly sliced garlic, olive oil, getting the garlic a little bit brown, adding a little pancetta, getting the flavor in there. White wine to make it brothy, maybe a little bit of the fresh water from the tomato juice. cooking the pasta 1 minute because it's an angel hair.
Yeah.
Then shaving some bottarga on the side, and then a little bit of pasta or a little bit of fresh parm and some good olive oil, and you're eating out of a bowl, and you're probably dripping some stuff on your shirt, but you're grubbing. You're going before you have your second bite, or you're done with your first bite. You're going right into your second bite.
This is so specific. Have you cooked for a Stoned Red Hot Chili Pepper before?
I've cooked for myself and my good friends late at night when we used to go to these clubs in LA, and we'd go, what are we doing? We're going back. And it was always probably Josiah and myself that would invite 10 or 15 people back to the house, and that would be one of the dishes we would make.
Wow.
And then you could actually have fun with that. Then from there you can maybe do some crepes.
Wow.
And what's nice about this is everybody can be engaged.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're just cooking. You actually can get everybody else kind of in the kitchen, and I think the importance is that you're not back there by yourself cooking. You're actually having fun. People are tasting, and then you can do a quick 2-minute crepe batter, and then there's probably jam, there's probably maple syrup, there's probably chocolate. Maybe you can have some fun with some crepes, and you can burn a couple crepes, and then everybody can get their hands in the crepes, and they can put their own sugar on, they can put their own jam on, and then you can just kind of get messy in the kitchen, but it's very interactive, and everybody's involved, as we shared in the beginning. It's kind of about, I think, getting everybody involved.
I love that. I mean, I often think about when I am having people over, how am I going to impress them? Not necessarily how am I going to get everybody involved, but I actually think that that's a much better way to approach it, because there's nothing more lonely than cooking for a bunch of people while they're all having fun in the living room getting drunk without you.
For sure, yeah. So that's where I think the fulfillment and the satisfaction comes in. And actually for them as well, because they get to see it, and then of course some fresh herbs at the end. But I was kind of thinking whatever we had in the fridge.
Nice, so I love that.
Probably
and now,
always have that in the fridge.
Bottarga and pancetta seems like an unusual combination, but you said it with such confidence that I think you've done it before.
Yeah, well, I think that the pancetta is early on with the garlic and the oil, and the bottarga is on top. It's just another layer of enhancement or flavor or something like that.
This sounds not unlike a really seafood-forward amatriciana.
There we go.
Wow.
There we go.
Okay, maybe you'll see that on a menu at Lunetta or Morel coming soon. Who knows? Hey, Chef, so we're in Santa Monica at this gorgeous restaurant at this beautiful hotel. You are yourself a quintessential Santa Monica kid, right? What taught you more growing up, surfing or cooking?
Definitely the beach culture and being on the shoreline and riding my bike from 6th and Rose to Station 26. You would get chased every day by the cholos getting down to the beach. You got down to the beach, that was your safe place.
Yeah.
Then the etiquette in the water and getting pushed down the beach by the older guys and then having to work your way in. I think it probably just gives us the opportunity to understand that nothing comes overnight, and sometimes things that So I think, and specifically with surfing, there's a long learning curve to surfing.
Yeah.
Just like there's a long learning curve to being in the kitchen. So I think surfing was a really good base to understand patience. Clearly, changing environment. Mother Nature's always changing.
Yeah.
Produce is always changing. All of our ingredients are always changing. The ocean and the weather are always changing. So I think we're learning a little bit of how to adapt and how to. And so I think that was a really kind of good base for me.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
What did you grow up eating? What were the sort of you've just spent all morning surfing. What are you crushing afterwards at Santa Monica when you were growing up?
What are you crushing afterwards? That's really a good way of stating it, because food does, I think when food tastes its best is after you've done something that you've had to really if you've been on a boat, you've been in the water, you've been skiing, you've been snowboarding, you've been out hiking, you've been outside and in the outdoors, and then you're coming back to something that a good bottle of red wine, maybe a cocktail, then a glass of red wine, then a bountiful feast. Food tastes really amazing after we've done that. Okay, so what I was crushing was this is kind of a funny story. I'd go surf out here, Ocean Park, and then we'd drive to Patina Restaurant. We were working at Patina, and we'd pull in, 2 hours early, 3 hours early, just to get ready for the dinner service. And we'd walk in and we'd see nothing but these just really high-end cars in the parking lot. You'd walk into the kitchen and it was absolute, not chaos, but it was you could just feel that was really a power lunch.
Yeah.
And we would start our prep. but we were working with the best ingredients. And we probably didn't have, we hadn't had a chance to have maybe a coffee in the morning, but I was crushing. We cooked 3 scallops for one dish, and there was a 4th scallop that was in the pan, and I'd have a bite of, I'd eat a scallop, all right? Or we were always tasting things, whether it was the whitefish risotto or whatever. So we were eating as well as the best that were in LA were eating, just in the work environment.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was kind of interesting because, we're in a rush. We're going to the beach every morning. Then we're driving, out to Melrose and Swall, or Melrose, to Patina, and then we find ourselves, eating really unique, interesting ingredients that we're always tasting.
Yeah.
We're always tasting.
Yeah.
So
I feel like most people will say like San Diego surfers, oh, we're getting some fish tacos afterwards. That is a much more elevated answer than that. We're tasting the scallops that we're going to serve the power lunch crowd on Melrose.
Yeah, or the lobster risotto or whatever it was. And it was pretty cool. But I think that what would be an ideal day, or what I would, what I think for most of us would be, to just enjoy a meal that you make with good family and friends.
Yeah.
Food really brings us together. My closest friend Josiah, we'll take Sundays, or we'll take one day a month or something, and we'll cook. We used to do that quite a bit when our kids were younger.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice way of watching your kids eat what you prepared and having them love it, and then spending time cooking outside, spending time together without the pressure of the restaurant.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I think for me it's much easier to cook, and there's much less pressure. I don't know, a little bit more, I wouldn't say curiosity, but just ease when you're cooking at home.
Yeah.
A lot of the ideas sometimes come from cooking at home, and then you'll take those back to the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it usually starts with going to a farmer's market, like on a Sunday morning, seeing what the vegetables are, and then later comes the protein or whatever, and then you incorporate it all together, and there's always a nice finish with some vinegar, citrus acid, or whatever it might be, fresh herbs. But that's a perfect Sunday.
I love that. That sounds like the way I'd want to spend my Sunday. It sounds from your stories that you started cooking at a pretty young age. When did you get into this?
So I started cooking at a young age. I've got a French mother, and her sister was from the Catalogne region, France, right along the Spanish, like close to the Spanish border. But she lived in an 18th century stone house, and she was amazing. I mean, this woman could cook from the earth and from the ground, and she was bold. She was vibrant. She was a hardcore woman.
Yeah.
She was tough, but her food had all of those characteristics. It was just tomatoes at their peak. There was always butter on the table, and a loaf of pain de campagne, which is like a country bread, and let's say there was a fresh made apricot jam, and you would go by and you'd grab a piece of bread and a piece of butter and throw a chunky apricot jam on it. And that's how it started.
Wow.
And then from there it went to roasted tomatoes with grilled mackerel over. We were surrounded by like dried vineyards that were just, we were probably at 2,000 feet, and right down was one road that would take us to a little beach called Collioure. And you know that when you're on the coast of the Mediterranean, there's mackerel, there's John Dory, there's rouget, there's all these beautiful fish. And she would bring the fish back up, and she would use the grapevines to cook over with roasted tomatoes, crushed garlic, basil, whatever fresh herbs. It was a really healthy, pure, bold way of cooking.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably the early inspiration, and my father was really good in the kitchen.
Oh,
and
really?
Then the third base was, my closest friend was, still is Josiah, and his mom knew how to cook with such a natural essence of blending. Like, food was always a little bit juicy.
Yeah.
And it was, and she was really amazing. Like, she cooked with sensibility.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about sensibility, so my aunt cooked with sensibility, but bold. Josiah's mom cooked with sensibility and just flavor.
And for listeners at home, you're talking about Josiah Citron, right?
I am, yeah.
So you guys knew each other very young?
We became closest friends in the 4th, 5th grade.
So way before either of you got into cooking.
Yeah, we were surfers. But we loved to go out to dinner. We loved to go out to breakfast. We would do ding repair to save money to go out to eat, to explore. We both love food.
So who got into a professional kitchen first?
I think we kind of both got into restaurant work towards the end of high school, which is probably too early. We should have been focusing on education and not been sidetracked by that. But we just both got into restaurant business early. I worked at West Beach Cafe for Bruce Martyr, and I was at the Broadway before. I was working with a chef from Trinidad, who did Caribbean cuisine and learned about chutneys and all that kind, chutneys and Caribbean style food, which is also pretty interesting.
Well, at the time, was it just a job for you guys, or were you guys feeling like did you guys have conversations like, yo, Josiah, Raphael, we're both really feeling this, we want to do this for real?
I think early on we definitely had a plan of getting out of high school, graduating high school. Joe was always pretty he's a smart guy. He did well in school. But our plan was always, I graduated in 85, he graduated in 86. Our plan was to open a restaurant together.
Oh, no way.
At an early age, yeah. It was always a dream.
That's how young are we talking here?
We're talking 15, 16 years old.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like that's a pretty rare thing for a 15, 16-year-old to dream about.
We love the art of going out, understanding hospitality, making sure that we would always leave a tip. It's like if we didn't have enough money to go out, if there wasn't enough money to leave a tip, we probably weren't. There always had to be figured in.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is going to cost us this. We got to leave this for a tip, and we love hospitality. It might be pork chops and eggs over easy with iced coffee and hash browns for breakfast. It might be Thai food for dinner, but the idea of being in the restaurant industry was pretty cool.
Now, be honest with me. Was it because of the food, or was it because everything around the food? Because, I know that, for a young person, I think getting into the kitchen, descriptions of kitchens, especially, I think, in the 80s, 90s, felt like a pirate ship, from what I understand. Was there something exciting and enticing about that as well?
I think it was about the food, for sure. It was about the food and the enjoyment of the food, but there was also an excitement.
Yeah.
I remember, going to West Beach Cafe in the, 83, 84.
Yeah.
And it was the hottest restaurant. Everybody was in there, and we were 17, 18 years old, kind of sneaking in there, but being surrounded by this, this Venice kind of audience that was as cool as, everybody was in there.
Yeah.
And seeing that environment, the white booths, the beautiful artwork, the bar, and the style, and just like the coolness that was surrounded by the restaurant industry. That was one. 72 Market Street was another one.
Yeah.
Chinois was always fun, but we saw this part of the restaurant industry that was food. It was style.
Yeah.
It was this bar. It was music. It was artwork. At that time, maybe it was really kind of stark. Mm-hmm. But it was pretty exciting being in Venice and Santa Monica and watching that be probably the inspiration of some of what we considered elevated dining California cuisine.
Right, because this was Wolfgang was one of the biggest chefs at the time, right? And then so you eventually went to Europe for a hot minute, right?
We graduated high school. Josiah graduated in 85. He moved over there, right? Tried to do something in Hawaii in the ocean.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I followed a few contests over there and over here, and I met Josiah over there. Then we traveled through the south of France, and we found, we were in Biarritz, we were in Portugal, we were in Spain. And the cool kind of story about this is, whenever you travel, it's always about surfing, but as we said, it's always about exploring food. So we found this restaurant called La Tetina de Bodega, and it was between Biarritz and a place called Guétari, kind of between Biarritz and Saint-Jean-de-Luz. Mm-hmm. And the surf there is just insane. It's and nobody really, there was a small group of surfers there, so we were good surfers. So we were going out there, and we were it was amazing, because we felt really confident, we felt really good, and we felt very welcomed.
Yeah.
But we walked in this restaurant, there was 5 things on the menu as appetizers and 5 entrees, and there was a whole roasted fish, and there was a côte de boeuf, which is like a bone-in prime rib, and they cooked it over wood fire. And there was this ball of vinegar that was on the table that had garlic and thyme and carrots and bay leaf. And it was the first time where we experienced, cooking this wood-fired côte de boeuf, and then you'd put this vinegar on top of the beef. And that was just another magical kind of moment of just traveling and exploring new food.
Yeah, it sounds like a Ratatouille moment in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So food has always been. Luckily, we're kind of fortunate and blessed because we've been able to pursue this world of restaurant industry and culinary, but kind of keep it next to the ocean.
Did you actually work in kitchens while you were in Europe?
So we went to Paris, and I was working at a restaurant called Montevideo with a chef by the name of George Vernalt, and then I showed up a year later, and coincidentally I had a friend who was opening this new restaurant. It was the same restaurant where George was going to be the chef, so we all worked there together. And then we worked, and then I kind of spent some time also in the front of the house, ran a really beautiful bar there, jumped kitchen, bar, front of the house, but really understood the restaurant world was much more of a profession.
Yeah.
Like when we had spoken about, restaurants here, they were jumping and they were cutting edge, and servers were, dressed, and they were going to be actors, they were writers, so forth. But over spending that time over there, which was almost 2 years, it was go to work 5 days a week, get paid once a month, survive for 2 weeks, and then starve for 2 weeks. But it was a really good introduction into the base and the fundamental kind of understanding of the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
So I think what we brought back from living in Paris and sharing an apartment and cooking pastas late at night, things like that, was that this is really a lifelong profession, where at that time here in California, maybe not so much in the kitchen, but other parts of the restaurant were more of a temporary type situation.
Yeah. How was the roommate situation? Good roommates? Like, you guys did well as roommates?
We did great. We lived on the 6th floor,
Yeah.
no elevator. We had one bed and we had one bedroom. So whoever had the bedroom would take the box spring, and whoever had the living room would have the mattress, and we switched off every month.
Wow.
And every month we would just switch off, and we lived there for, I don't know, a year and a half, and it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
we had so much fun. It was on the 15th, and we both worked in the neighborhood, and it was, it's hard to do laundry, and
Yeah.
it was hard to, walk up and down the stairs every day. If you forgot something, you had to walk back up. But it was super special. Paris was a really beautiful place. It was kind of towards the end of when where you still had the small boulangeries, butcher shops. It was still Paris, and Paris is still beautiful.
Yeah.
But it was amazing.
It was unique.
Yeah,
at
it
the time,
it was an outstanding place to spend a few years, and
Right.
and with your best friend, and see the seasons, and see, it's dark all day in the wintertime, and light till 11 o'clock in the summertime, and you go from outside dining to just never seeing the sun.
Yeah.
So-
For two kids from Santa Monica, that's quite a stark awakening, I can imagine.
It was a good experience.
And so after that, we're still in the 80s, right? Or going into the 90s. And I feel like back then, if you wanted to pursue fine dining, a lot of people probably gravitated towards cities like New York. But you chose to come back to Santa Monica. Why'd you decide to come back here?
Santa Monica was home, so we came back from Paris. I remember we were walking through Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, and we'd been there for about a year and a half. And then back in those days, Paris was rocking with a lot of American influence, but we were walking through Luxembourg Gardens, and we were blasting Led Zeppelin, and it was going California. And we just looked at each other and we said, you know what? Let's go home. Let's go home. We've been here long enough. And we came back to California, and we immediately had this vision of we worked, but we had a goal and a vision of opening a spot.
Yeah. And so take me to that. What happened? How did that vision materialize?
So it was kind of cool. We came back, and we came back from France, and we really didn't have a place to live, and we lived in the back studio of my dad's studio, 4 of us, and we destroyed his studio, and we just it's good to be back. It was good to be back here, but we worked. One thing that that I think is that I can say is that, even though there was, some raging going on or whatever, we were always committed to working. And how did we get to that spot? We worked at Patina. We worked at Patina. I was at the Broadway Deli. Josiah was at Chinois. We both went to Patina. Then we went to a little spot on Abbot Kinney called Capri, and there was nothing going on there. We were splitting $500 a week to be there. There was a huge split in the cutting board, and our first night we did like 12, 15 covers for the first month, and we're scratching our heads going, wow, did we make a mistake? And then things started to happen, and then we started getting busier, and then we got a little write-up from Kathy Jenkins from the LA Times, and it was just a small little write-up. It was the first time we saw our names in print, and that was probably 80, 88, 89. Yeah. And from there, we had an opportunity to open up this restaurant in West Hollywood called Jackson's, and that was like a real restaurant, and we went in there as co-chefs, and we did some good food there. We got a few more write-ups, and then we decided that we just wanted to kind of try to do our own thing.
The band broke up.
We decided we wanted to do our own thing on our own. But we actually did take a little space, thinking, hey, do we want to do this together? We've been doing this for a while, and this opportunity came up on 5th and Santa Monica. And it was 502 Santa Monica Boulevard. It had been an Indian restaurant called the British Raj that had a good little history. It's always nice to open up in a restaurant that's had some history. Like Providence was Patina. And before that it was San Michel. And so we saw this little space, and we walked in with not a bunch of cash, and we negotiated a deal with our landlord. Signed personal on the lease, which you should never ever do, and we opened up Giraffe in 1996.
Wow. And Giraffe really helped define Santa Monica dining in the early 2000s. It was everywhere. I mean, I know Jonathan Gold loved it.
Yeah.
What was the dish that, if you had to say, this is the dish that paid the rent, what was it? So
the dish that paid the rent was probably the pork chop. It was a play of pork chops and applesauce, but I think Giraffe was really, we had the farmer's market just a few blocks away. So we were definitely inspired by the vegetables. And then sometimes the proteins came secondary. But I think the pork chop or we were doing tasting menus back in those days. And it was a really tough kitchen to do tasting menus, but we worked, like we were just talking earlier, we butchered everything there, and it was a small kitchen, and to think about that kind of, breaking down pork, breaking down, beef, filleting all your own fish. It was a lot. It was a lot of work, but it was it was through what we had experienced previously. It was a really good kind of just natural progression of where we were and what we were doing.
So how was the experience of running Giraffe, which sounds like it was your first time, both of your first times, actually sort of being the head honchos in a spot after having run kitchens for other people? How was that experience different for y'all? Just
scratching our heads going, why did we do this? We actually got a really nice write-up from Irene a couple months in, and that was huge. And the day before we opened, we had done a special dinner where we invited a bunch of people, and we pretty much tripled the amount of people that we thought we were going to do. But we had plumbing issues. We had a really small kitchen. We didn't have a bar. So it's the real dive into the deep end and figure out or get caught inside when you're going surfing relentlessly and you're trying to make the paddle out, but you keep getting caught inside. So it was great. And 97, we got 10 Best New Chefs. We went to Aspen. We met Julia Childs. We cooked with 10 chefs that we kind of stayed friends with. Those friends, later we went to Philadelphia. We cooked at a friend's. We did a beer dinner, and we did all of our prep in Philadelphia. So there were some really good pieces that came out of it. But it was definitely it was a grind. Like, there's a mutual friend that we all have that was Neil Fraser, for example. It's like, I would never open a restaurant the way you guys did it. Way too hard. I'm like, well, hey, we didn't have a choice. We had to do it. But it was like.
What do you mean you didn't have a choice?
We knew we wanted to do it. And we were young, and you think that you've thought everything through, but it's just like, looking at that new car and going, oh, or should I buy that car, or should I do this? But, we dove in hard, and we raised a little bit of money, not much, but we did it through just nuts and bolts, and traded stations every night, meat station 1 week, kind of like the bed situation in Paris. One week it was meat station, 1 week it was vegetable station. But we always stayed committed to always showing up and always making sure that we learned. I think we really learned. I think kitchen taught us responsibility.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're in school and you get behind on your schoolwork, it's really hard to catch up.
Yeah.
Or even if you get behind on your finances, it's really hard to catch up. When you're in the kitchen, it really teaches you. I think it teaches you responsibility, and it teaches you organization, and it teaches you so many other life skills that are really important. I mean, it's just because it's a grind.
Yeah.
It's a grind.
And it sounds like you guys kind of learned it as you were flying the plane.
We did have some good knowledge and experience working with who we had worked with previously.
Yeah,
those were really great mentors and great people to watch.
Yeah.
And just learning and understanding and seeing that.
And you guys rose to really high levels of success. Obviously, you mentioned the 1997, was it Food and Wine Best New Chefs?
Best New Chefs,
right,
yeah.
And so a lot of accolades. Of course, an entire new generation got to know your restaurants, at least I did, because you were featured in Curb Your Enthusiasm a couple times, right? Both Giraffe and even Lunetta a couple times as well, right?
Yeah, Lunetta, yeah.
What was that like? What was Larry's order?
Oh, Larry, so that was just a show, but Larry's funny. He's very particular, and he comes in, and his personality is just like what you would see when, you see his show. He's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is funny, and he's just funny. Yeah, he was in a few weeks ago. He had a salmon sandwich, and he still comes in. And
no way.
Yeah.
Salmon sandwich. That's what he's eating these days.
Yeah, salmon sandwich. Yeah, he's
noted. Okay, if you want to feel like Larry David, people, go to Lunetta and get the salmon sandwich.
Yeah, get the grilled salmon sandwich.
So Lunetta and Morel are your restaurants that you're operating right now, right?
Yes.
So they both feel very you, but obviously we're in Morel right now, and I can say, having been to Lunetta, it feels very different than Lunetta. What's the connective tissue between these two restaurants?
So I think the connective tissue between the two restaurants would be the base foundation of the ingredients.
Yeah.
And I think technique probably changes a little bit. It's really I think it's important to surround ourselves with people that we can, be inspired by and learn from, and there's so much to see. It's tricky because, having Lunetta right up the street, the style of cooking that I'm familiar with is kind of what Giraffe was, but downplayed a little, not downplayed, but a little more coastal and not as fine dining as what Giraffe was. This is by the beach. Morel is by the beach. It's a beautiful room, so it does want to be elevated a little bit. So there's kind of a space where it's very approachable. So they're both very approachable. This is probably a little bit more coastal.
Yeah. And
that's probably a little bit more, lends a little bit more on what Giraffe, what I knew at Giraffe. Mm-hmm. And this is so a little more coastal.
Yeah.
But definitely rooted from the farmers market. And we've got a really good team here. And it's taken a moment, but our team is flowing, and food's bright, food's colorful, but it's also sophisticated, it's refined, and it's been good. I'm proud of it.
What are the dishes you're particularly proud of here at Morel?
So there's here masa crudo that we do that is just fresh. It represents the coast. It's nice.
Yeah.
Food is what I've learned here, what I've seen, and maybe is sometimes a little bit more restraint is actually working out better. So I think some of the restraint that I'm still adapting to and trying to understand is that it actually works.
Yeah.
The diner here is perhaps a little bit different. It's more of a, not that one is more fun than the other, but we're looking at the ocean.
Right.
So it's kind of like a celebration. There's definitely more sharing opportunities here. Brunch rocks.
Yeah.
And I think it's more share plates. So it's definitely seafood, and and there's the roasted chicken and the New York steak are killer.
Yeah.
They're killer and they're good, and your environment's good, and you're looking at the ocean, and once you come down here, you feel like you're in a really kind of calm. It's like you're pulling yourself away from the chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Ocean Avenue and Santa Monica, and you're down here. It's like, okay, you know what? I can really relax down here and enjoy the space.
I came from Highland Park first, and then Playa, and I feel like I'm on vacation. Honestly.
Yeah,
like just entering this room, I feel like I haven't even had any of the food yet, but I'm just like totally on vacation.
Chris at the bar is making some beautiful drinks. Robert in the kitchen is really inspired to do good food, and we're keeping it fresh. We're keeping it coastal California, and we're being innovative.
Yeah,
we're being innovative.
Well, one thing that's clear from the entirety of this conversation is that you've cooked through many different eras of Los Angeles food and Los Angeles restaurants. What's one trend you secretly miss, and one trend you wish had never happened?
So there's probably been so many, like, sous vide cooking was like, that was where everybody was 15 years ago, and there was a reason for it.
Yeah.
And I've had these really fun conversations, or with other chefs, with social media and with all of that, the ideas, like, we can see so much.
Yeah.
So you can actually see something that you love, and then you can put your own interpretation on it. The thing about it, I feel like with cooking, somebody could say it's been done before.
Yeah.
It's been done before, but there's always a way to create something, special or innovative or different from what it's been like. We're going to try to do a lobster thermidor tomorrow for this guest chef dinner we're doing, but it's like, if you think of a lobster thermidor, you're thinking of something that is kind of under the broiler with a cream-based sauce and Dijon mustard, and kind of like a heavy 60s dish or 70s dish. And this really has no dairy in it. It's super fresh. It's super vibrant. So it's a different play.
Yeah.
On we're not calling it a lobster thermidor, but that's kind of just the visual that I see, and I go, okay, I just saw this beautiful lobster thermidor. I want to do that, but actually we're gonna put a different spin on it. But we spoke about that earlier. I think being informed is really important, and there are chefs that really dive deep into everything, and just like there's just people in the world that are always going to be first on everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's our personality and our character, and I think I kind of wait, like I kind of wait for things to come, and then I sometimes I feel like I may feel differently in 15, 20 years, but sometimes I feel like I could be a little bit, late to the party. But I think I do that intentionally because I kind of want to see it and feel it where it goes, and then I can put my own. Maybe that's a safety thing. I don't know, but then I can put my or our interpretation on something like that.
It's interesting.
The daring, like, if you ask me to go paddle out on a big day, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, all right, you know what? I can see there's riptide here. I think the wind's going to come up, so I need to go paddle out now before the wind comes up.
Yeah.
So in that kind of sense, I would jump right on it. In cooking, like for example, with sous vide cooking, or cooking, there's a place for it, and it's really efficient and it saves space. But cooking a piece of meat, marinating a pork chop, and doing that in a sous vide, you're going to get so much more.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna sous vide a steak or a rack of lamb, or you can just go straight on the fire with fresh herbs or whatever, I think I would rather go straight on wood fire with fresh herbs, letting the meat rest, having the proper technique, slicing it, and seeing. I think you could get the same results. Yeah. But I feel like you're going to get, I think traditionally it might be nice to go that way, but we have to be open to everything. Like I mean, we have, the world is changing so fast right now that if we're not in front of it, I guess we're behind it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because honestly what I'm hearing is almost like this ethos of fuck the trends. I'm just going to trust my intuition kind of in terms of what I think has staying power or what actually serves a purpose or tastes good or treats the ingredients well. I think that's a really cool ethos to espouse.
How do you feel? How do you feel like right now with so much information out there and doing what you do and I mean, do you get yourself out there to know as much as you can, or do you kind of just flow with it and take in what you're experiencing every day?
Yeah. Well,
or do you drive a little bit more to find out as much as you can?
I mean, I'm definitely obviously we are operating, you and I, obviously me on the media side, you on the restaurant side. It's a little different, right? Because for me, it's part of, I feel like, our job to go out there and try the new trendy stuff. For example, I'm ashamed to say I still haven't tried Dubai chocolate, which seems to be everywhere right now. But that's something I should probably try to be informed in terms of why is everybody doing this? What does it even taste like, right? I'm not particularly interested in it though. I do it because I feel like I have to.
Because you need to, right?
But to me, what actually interests me more is interesting and compelling stories. So your story is the most interesting thing to me, and to see how that's reflected in your food as a chef and how it speaks to your sense of place and where you came from, where you've been, where you traveled, what you've been inspired by.
The city we live in, all the other people. I've listened to your podcast and you've talked about, the best pizza or the best tacos or all of that. And I think that you are in front of it. You are going out there and you are, progressive and you're doing all that.
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going to go with this. I apologize.
Well, no, but it's an interesting conversation, because I feel like from a restaurateur perspective, I think you could get swept up in trying to anticipate the trends, right? Or trying to ride the trends. But you've kind of, I don't know, do you feel like you've done that over the course of your career? Do you feel like you've had to hop on those trends to stay relevant, or do you feel like you've just stayed true to what you believe in and your ethos, and that's worked out for you?
I was reading the Raphael cookbook. I read it 5 years ago, and then I just started going through it again last week, and I was reading, the intro, and I was reading all the, and even the just the hummus and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really when you go into the simplicity, but when you go into it, it is so exciting. It's so rich.
Yeah.
The stories behind it give you so much, and that simple little text in that book can actually, do so much for me as far as expanding my awareness or my consciousness of something that I want to make. So that was there are those. I mean, there are those moments where they seem very basic, but when you hear those words from somebody else's perspective,
for sure,
you can really feel where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And then that's damn, I love that, and I want to do that, and I want to do that with something different. But I think that's the part that is really important, is to stay connected and maybe take the time and dig a little bit, or just research. I don't use research, but just let your curiosity go into something that maybe just you're sitting around and instead of maybe being on that device, go into a book and read a paragraph and understand where someone's base formula, where their base ideas came from, and that is pretty inspirational, because sometimes they're so simplistic and they come from some memory that triggered something from childhood, and that's really, I think, what triggers all of us, is something that we understand from our childhood, and maybe we're not quite aware of that enough right now.
No, that's really interesting. So, you speak, it sounds like you are an inherently curious person. Obviously, you've traveled a ton, you've been sort of drawn to a number of different things, even the way you're talking about just picking up the Raphael cookbook, right, and reading about the hummus. When you look at the current landscape of Los Angeles dining in 2025, are there things happening or people cooking that you look at, even younger chefs, for example, and think, damn, that's fucking awesome, I love that?
Yeah, I think that, I think that the last couple of years, there's always, a new restaurant, and there's inspiring ideas, food. Abigail has got her hand on the pulse with everything. She knows what's going on.
Abigail.
like, I mean, for example, I mean, Ari's food is simple, it's foundational, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
Cocktails have taken a whole nother place from what we've seen. I can go to the farmer's market on a Wednesday and see, a number of, we spoke about doing this for a few decades. So there was friendships that happened 20, 30, 35 years ago from chefs from LA, and we're still all close friends.
Yeah.
And then there's younger chefs that go down there, and you can see what they're doing, and it's pretty exciting to see how much is going on.
Yeah.
And the enthusiasm and the energy, and I think even more so, it's really interesting to see how people are surviving in the industry.
Yeah.
Because there's the part of the creativity and the inspiration and using the best products and all of that, but then there's the reality of keeping a business solid and healthy.
Yeah.
Like fiscally healthy and financially healthy and team and staff and all of that.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because, I feel like the storyline, the narrative that's sort of everywhere is that this is the hardest environment ever to run a restaurant in because of the economics, the labor costs, food costs. You've been through a number of different eras of LA dining. Do you agree? Is this the hardest, or has it always been hard?
If I was 26 years old right now and I was thinking about opening a restaurant, I knew this was going to be the next 40 years of my life. Ooh, that would be pretty. Knowing what I know now and looking back on it, it's always been a hard industry. We spoke about Giraffe in the beginning. We had structural issues that made it difficult. But it's always been a hard industry. It's all of the margins have been really, have gotten really tight.
Yeah.
And it does take some of the joy out of the business. So I think it's really important and that's when we started this conversation, is sometimes you'll spend more with people in the kitchen than you do even at home.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to really connect with your team. Emilio, who's in the kitchen here right now, we'll usually give each other, 2 or 3 hugs a week at the end of a shift. We try to take time to recognize and understand each other. But you have to find those small, you have to find those pieces in the industry.
Yeah.
You have to find the connection with hospitality and your guests.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to connect with your guests and listen to them and hear some of their stories. Because I think every business has probably gotten pretty squeezed.
Yes.
But so we'd love to say, it's just the restaurant business, but really I think it's across the board.
Yeah.
The important piece to all of this is that the beauty of being in the restaurant industry and cooking food and seeing people enjoy food afterwards is the part of the fulfillment that we can take home with us.
Yeah.
And that can actually push us forward to continue to do what we do.
Yeah.
And I think there is so much ego and there's so much of this and there's a lot of that, but I think when it comes down to it, it's like there is a brotherhood and there's friendships and once the egos go away and the brotherhood comes back and the friendships are there, and then you communicate about the ideas or what you're doing or the challenges.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's really nice to have the support of friends that are deep in the industry as we are, and you can call them openly and say, hey, how was your week? What are you feeling? And and you have that, and that continues to say, what, I'm not alone here. We're all right. But and we are all right. But there's a truth there that it's like anything. It's like it's like bringing people together and understanding and being conscious and aware and being grateful.
Yeah.
I think really being grateful, and at this point doing this long, it's like it's been really good, and we're still driven. Emilio's in the kitchen, Hugo's in the kitchen, Robert's in the kitchen. We cut this fish today, and I probably hadn't cut a fish in a while, and I cut it really. I was really proud of, just the fact that I was able to fillet these fish so nicely.
Yeah.
And that's like, all right, that feels good. And we've got Alan Wong coming in. He's coming in tonight, and tomorrow we'll do an early journey to the farmer's market. We'll find the finished products to, we're doing a 6-course tasting menu here on Thursday night. It incorporates Hawaiian regional cuisine. He's like the father of Hawaiian regional cuisine, and what we do here, and we blended a menu together. But it'd be really nice to cook together. I called him a few minutes ago before we started saying, hey, I had a question about, a lobster. And he took his time to like share that with me.
Yeah.
But there's just been friendships in the industry that you hold on to.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably pretty universal for any of us, whether we're back of the house, front of the house, understanding the industry.
That's really well said, Chef. Well, hey, you've been extremely generous with your time. It has been such a delight to speak with you. I'd just like to close out with one question we ask all our guests. What are 3 restaurants you're really loving right now?
3 restaurants I'm really loving right now. Good question. All right.
Doesn't even have to be right now. They could be your all-time favorites, too.
All-time favorites. All right, let me think about that for a little bit. So I had dinner at Charcoal last night with Josiah, and he's doing us. So we had the chicken wings, and we had a calamari salad, and then we had a lutemere, and the lutemere was the same vinegar we spoke about. That's what you brushed on top of it, and it was kind of a Basque dish, and then we shared a big porterhouse, and he does a homemade green and yellow or green and red sriracha that he makes himself, and that sriracha on everything with that vinegar was rich and foundational, bright and delicious.
Wow!
So that was just a really, really nice meal. But we usually go there once a week and have a really fulfilling meal and really, really, really wonderful, and it's always delicious. I'm just going to tell you, I went to night market last Friday night, and I had a whole roasted fish that brought me back to Bali, or brought me back to it was just, to get a whole fish here sometimes is really hard.
Yeah.
And that whole fish brought me back to some of my favorite, when you get a whole fish and it's got some sweet and some heat and the green beans. It was delicious.
Yeah.
So that brought me back to just one of my favorite dishes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was really nice. And the third would be I got to go Italian, and I love to cook Italian at home.
Clearly, you fed the Red Hot Chili Peppers some pasta.
Yeah. That was layers of soupy pasta, but delicious. Angel hair had to be angel hair, because that goes. It's kind of crazy. It's not kind of crazy, but it's kind of, food is always about exploring and getting flavors. But I'd have to say that it's home for me, and Bella's like a mother to me. She's like a stepmother, and it's where I've celebrated many birthdays. And the food's always good, and I'm just gonna have to say, so we're gonna go Charcoal, we're gonna go the Fish at Night Market, and we're gonna finish it with Chinois on Main.
Nice.
Just because Chinois, it's home, and it's always been home, and it's like you walk in there, and again, there's parts that it's about the food, it's about the hospitality, it's about the vibe, it's about the warmness.
Yeah.
That you get, and it's about the thought and that there's several different pieces to it, but yeah, I'm gonna conclude that with Chinois on Main. It's family.
I love that.
It's
great
family.
Answer, great reason. Chef, you've been a delight to speak with. Congratulations on all your success. We're going to put the links to all your restaurants in the show notes, but just wanted to say thank you for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast. Thanks to Chef Raphael Lunetta for making the time for us. Thanks to the Sanborn Hotel for hosting us for the interview. And thank you to you, dear listener, for tuning in to another episode. If you like what you heard here today, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating, review, subscribe. Seriously, all that stuff really, really helps us. We'll be back next week with another epic episode, but if you're looking for me in the meantime, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, and even our website at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCountdown. You can also find us at acquiredtastemedia.com and on Instagram at It's Acquired Taste. That's ITSACQUIREDTASTE.